Okay, today we're going to be looking at a few things related to what we talked about yesterday, which was Joe Farmer. Now, yesterday in class we talked about Joe Farmer, and you did your Google map, in which you should have analyzed, would it be easier to travel simply from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia, or would it have been easier to go from Pittsburgh to New Orleans? Now, obviously, these routes that I just drew right there aren't really very realistic. To understand what I was trying to get at is to avoid the Appalachian Mountains here, and I'll kind of click out of that real quick. To avoid the Appalachian Mountains here, what we would have needed to do to get to Philadelphia is probably travel northward into New York, find a little bit of a way down, and then come down to Philadelphia, which actually isn't as easy as it looks because you would have had rivers to contend with and not really necessarily to benefit you completely, and other issues as well, given that traveling on land was not very easy. Versus if you're going to go down to New Orleans, you can just follow, and I'm going to do an inexact one, follow down the Ohio River, down the Mississippi, and then into New Orleans, which would have been a little bit easier potentially. So that was the point we were trying to get at with yesterday's lesson. But let's move on here today. The warm-up says, how would your life change if your parents' jobs transferred them to England and you needed to leave in 1 week? Now, you can think of all the different things, but the point is this would be life-changing. And what we're looking at today isn't necessarily something that's life-changing for an individual, but history-changing for our country. And that event is what's going to lead us to gaining the Louisiana Territory. Our targets for today. First, I can explain why Thomas Jefferson wanted to buy New Orleans, which I think we all know already. And two, I can explain why France was willing to sell not only New Orleans, but also the entire Louisiana Territory. For our target today, he says this is going to be difficult because he has this major obstacle in the way, being this big wall. But meanwhile, there's something else going on the horizon that might change his fortunes. And this deals with none other than, if it clicks over for me, Mr. Chuck Norris, and he says, finally I'll get my payback on Super Wilson. So he jumps on the launch button to launch his Patriot missile with his evil laugh. And his Super Wilson is flying through the sky. It sure is nice outside. And then he says, did a fly just hit me? Now let's move on to this one. Chuck Norris says, oh no, because he sees the Patriot missile coming back to him. Explosion. And then the unnecessary Patriot missile blows up that wall and allows us to easily hit our target. Sometimes that happens, though, in reality, where you have things, and this is obviously a goofy example, but where something that's completely unrelated to your event does change in its nature, and it really does help you. And that's what we're going to see today. And Chuck Norris goes to Joe. Okay, recap to Joe Farmer. So the Mississippi River was important for trade, especially for those who were living west of the Appalachian Mountains. And at this point in time in history, it's well over 20% of the population in America is west of the Appalachian Mountains. So that does tell you, hey, there's a lot of people here who really could benefit from improved trade over in the west. When you really think about it, the further people get from the coast, the more difficult it becomes to use the ocean for trade, so they're going to need to use rivers and things of that nature, which is why we can connect this back to New Orleans, because that is a trading port that is connected directly to rivers. So New Orleans was a great trade city that could benefit America. The problem was it was owned by foreign countries. First Spain, later France, and we're going to be focusing really more on France today. Because when France was owning it, this is when Napoleon Bonaparte had his rise to power. He was a very dangerous leader, and we'll talk about him a little bit more in a few minutes. So, as you can see, New Orleans, which is the city that is located right down here with my wonderful circle around it, that is really important for us. France under Napoleon. Napoleon was a military leader in France, really more of a dictator and a conqueror than he was like a king. But he wanted to control as much land as possible to build a vast empire. He was even looking at expanding his empire into the Americas. Here's Napoleon Bonaparte. He's most famously, I feel like, known as being the really small dictator. He was something like 5'5", 5'6". Not quite as small as people portray him to be at times, because at his point in time in history, people weren't towering and massive. Actually, over time, it seems like people were actually getting to be more, a little bit taller. Now, when you look at the map here, you can see the blue is area that was either the French Empire originally, which is this darker blue over here, or we have the lighter blue, which is area that was controlled by Napoleon. Then we have the hot pink, I guess you could say, which are countries and lands that were French allies. So when you look at the area of influence that Napoleon had, it really was tremendous. It was basically almost all of Western Europe, and then almost all of Eastern Europe even too. So I mean, his power, his influence, and his skill as a military leader are very evident by the amount of land that he was able to control. Now, what did he want to do in America? That's like an interesting thing to be thinking about, because he has all this interest in France. I'm not suggesting to anybody here for a second that he didn't want, or that he wanted to leave Europe, because that's not the case at all. It's just America was looked at, let's say, as an area for expansion in a different manner. So, What was his goal, and why did he want to control New Orleans? Because that's what we're going to be talking about here in a few minutes. Well, he wanted to control America and New Orleans for the same reason that Britain wanted to control America early on, to build an empire and to make money. They wanted to utilize America's resources in their own way. Now, how is owning New Orleans going to help France? Well, here's what Napoleon's plan originally was. He wanted to control the port city of New Orleans and then grow crops in Louisiana. Now, Louisiana is not the modern state. I'll show you the boundary here in a few minutes. From Louisiana, he would grow all these crops that he could then ship to the French islands in the Caribbean, like Haiti, which was by far their most beneficial island that they had there. And in Haiti, what they would do then is instead of growing any real crops that they could use for consumption of their slaves that worked there, because it is slaves that work there, they're going to use that land primarily just for sugar growth, because sugar was a very valuable product that you can only grow in certain climates, and Haiti was one of them, and then they could ship that back to Europe. It was kind of similar to the triangle trade that England used, and it sounds like a good plan overall. So here's what we're looking at. If this is our area here that we're talking about as being Louisiana, obviously not an exact portrayal, but it's a general idea to give you the gist here. He says, look, let's send work there. They can farm things like grains, ship them over here to Haiti, and then from Haiti they can produce other crops like sugar that are very valuable and send those back to Europe where we can make a lot of money. Haiti, just so you know, Hispaniola was the island that Columbus first landed on, same one, and Dominican Republic in modern times is also on the same island. So we're talking about the same island in all those different situations. Now, what is the deal with America and New Orleans? Well, Thomas Jefferson wanted to purchase New Orleans from Napoleon because, well, he wanted to guarantee all these people living west, hey, we're going to help you out. And for other people considering moving west, why don't you move out there? We have all kinds of free land here, not free land, but open land between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River that we want to utilize as best we can because it's good for our country. So what he did is he sent some diplomats or ambassadors to meet with Napoleon's diplomats and ambassadors, and he told them that they could negotiate as much as $10 million to buy just the city of New Orleans. The French minister Talleyrand wasn't really interested because he said, nah, that's okay, because he knew what Napoleon was looking to do, and it didn't really fit in with their plan because they needed New Orleans in order to be able to create this empire there. Well, something really, really unforeseen happened because first we have the Americans getting rejected, and then in Haiti they have this slave revolt that ends up being, well, going to change history, let's just put it that way. So Haiti was the wealthiest of France's Caribbean colonies. There should be an apostrophe there. But it was controlled by the wealthy French plantation owners with African slaves working the fields. These slaves heard about what happened in the French Revolution, and they thought, hey, if French, if they were successful, if the Americans were successful, why can't we? It's kind of an interesting idea because as we're going to look at here tomorrow, it's not just about the French losing their land. It's about the Spanish losing land. It's all these countries here in Europe who had these empires in the Americas. They all start losing them because one by one they start recognizing, hey, or these colonies start recognizing, hey, these other ones gain their independence. Why can't we? So Haiti does this, and they end up being successful. Actually, it's really, really amazing because it's a slave rebellion that actually wins. They were led by a slave by the name of Toussaint Louverture, and I apologize for my poor accent. Napoleon tried to retake control of the island, but it was unsuccessful, and this really ends Napoleon's dreams for this American empire because Haiti was the most beneficial, most profitable island that he had, and there's Louverture right there. So the big point now is, if we don't have Haiti, what are we going to do with this land? Because it's now kind of disconnected given that Haiti was our #1 colony here. Well, Talleyrand, who originally was not interested in selling New Orleans for $10 million, comes back and says, you know what, we've got a new offer. The offer was all of Louisiana, including New Orleans, for $15 million. I mean, that's when you look at the land that we gained from Louisiana, this is absolutely unbelievable how much it really amounts to. With this purchase, it basically doubles the size of the United States. I mean, look at this area of land here, this Louisiana Purchase land. And the borders aren't 100% exact, but it gives you the general idea. But look at that land versus what we already had in America. I mean, it's unreal how much land we're actually gaining with this purchase of $15 million. Now, if you're to do this inflation-wise, that'll be somewhere in the range of $200+ million. So it is definitely expensive, but it's nothing crazy, even for their time period. Now, what was Napoleon thinking? Well, it's pretty simple. Louisiana was now disconnected. It didn't really fit in with the French Empire and their plans. And most importantly, he was in a war with Britain. And they needed the money. Wars cost a lot of money. And in order to win a war, if you have more money, it's going to allow you to buy more everything, supplies, weapons, whatever. So this was very important to him to get the money. Which brings us to a couple random big ideas. Random big idea number 1. The most powerful country does not always win the war. We've talked about this already once with the colonists versus the British in the Revolutionary War. The colonists definitely were not as powerful as the British, but they had some things in their favor. They were more motivated to win because they had more to fight for. And then from the other side, the side of the stronger country, sometimes it's not easy to pay for a war, especially if you're already involved in other wars. Sometimes it's just too far from your home, and it's like, you know what, is this really worth it? People don't really see the good connection there, and thus they don't support you. This is what happened with America and Vietnam. It's not to say that America lost Vietnam, but America definitely didn't win. And all these similar things came up. It was expensive. It was costing lives. People said, why are we doing this? It's so far from home. It's not worth it. We've got other things to focus on. And in the end, these things all add up. So the country that really is stronger doesn't end up winning because the other side is willing, well, they're willing to fight it out for a while and lose people, supplies, money because they see their cause as being more worthwhile. Random big idea number 2. The actions of individuals change history. It does not magically change on its own. We've talked about so many times in class. I mean, I have Columbus listed on here. We could talk about George Washington and all the things that he did. I mean, even setting the precedents that he did by saying, nope, I'm only going to serve 2 terms in office. Nope, instead of calling me Your Highness, call me Mr. President. Those things have big ramifications going forward in the future. And that's an important thing to understand. It's not magic. It's not just like, oh, it's gonna happen that way. I think it's easy to say that because we can't see the other side, because that's one thing about history and life. You can't always see the exact result of what would have happened, so we like to say, oh, it was just going to happen anyways. With history, it's about individuals. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. When you think about some of the evil people in history, Adolf Hitler, I mean, he went out on his own. He pushed for himself a lot. He did all the things he needed, worked very hard to get himself in the position to do negative things too. So don't think it's only going to be positive. Sometimes it's actually very negative too, and that's something that we need to be very mindful of. I'm not suggesting that if Columbus didn't discover America, though, that nobody would have and just would have been like blotted out of the map or something like that. But maybe if Toussaint Louverture wouldn't have done what he did, maybe slavery would have still existed in Haiti going forward for a long time. You never know. I think that it's good to connect this to you guys, and it's like when you think about getting an A+, people are like, oh, or really in our terms, oh, but people are like, oh, that kid just always gets good grades. Well, some of those people who tend to always get good grades are the ones who put in the time. So if you're sitting at home playing video games and you don't get the grades that you want, I mean, there's a direct connection there with your individual life being in control too. Something to think about at the very least. And random big idea number 3. The future is unwritten and can change for the better or worse any day. That's an important thing to understand. When you think about some of these situations, it seems like when hope is lost, that's when things change. In the Revolutionary War, the Continental Army could have given up when times were tough. And where would we be now if they had done that? I mean, it's amazing to think about. With the Haitian Revolution, they were probably going through some really rough times, and they gave up, and then they were ultimately successful. Now, I don't want you to think for a second that I'm saying that Haiti is like this ultra happy place, because actually tomorrow we're going to look at Haiti and say, was their revolution really a success given how poor they are today? But the idea is that it can change for better or worse based upon actions. It's not like we're always headed in the right direction. I think about America, and people think, oh, America is always going to be this ultra-powerful country, that we're just going to be that way because it's been that way for a couple hundred years. That's how it's going to be. Do you think that anybody in Rome ever thought that they were going to fall? So it's an important thing to think about, is how, with these events, with our country even, you have to look and recognize that things can change. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. So maybe we'd be having the British flag here if we'd quit when times were bad, and who knows, maybe there would have been an earlier World War if there would have been a couple different changes in history. We don't know what it is because it can change so easily. Now, a couple of questions here. First, I want you to connect the dots. Jefferson wants to buy New Orleans. What happens in the middle that leads to the Haitian Revolution, or maybe that occurs there that means we don't get New Orleans? And then a couple more things missing, and then America purchases the entire Louisiana Territory. So I want you to find dots 2, 4, and 5. Okay, now, dot 2, we could say Jefferson wants to buy New Orleans. He sends diplomats to pay $10 million, but he is denied because Haiti is a part of the plan, denied by Talleyrand. The Haitian Revolution occurs, and we could say number 4, the French now have lost their ability to maintain an empire in America. 5th, they decide to approach America and offer to sell the entire Louisiana Territory for $15 million. Then, thus, we get it. And then cause and effect practice number 2. I'm sorry, cause and effect practice number 1. What would America be like had the Continental Army surrendered rather than endure the harsh winter of Valley Forge? Who knows? This is something to think about. It's something that you could have potentially considered. But the connection I want to make is this. How would it have impacted America around the year 1800 if Haiti was not successful in their revolution or in their revolt? Would we be what we are today? Interesting to think. We don't know for sure, but it's always nice to think about these things. So there's our lesson for today on gaining the Louisiana Territory.